Congratulations to the class of 21, and our special thanks to producers Jason Calabretta and Katie Rempshin and editor Barry Silverman.
Well, another historic moment for these historic times. An Oregon lawmaker booted from office, the first ever for letting armed protesters into the Capitol.
Someday you're going to be watching Jeopardy and somebody's going to say, "Who is Mike Nearman?" And that's going to be the right answer for that.
And you survive a wildfire and start to rebuild your life, only to find out rebuilding is very expensive as the price of lumber skyrockets.
I don't understand why, and all the tree supply is here, and you can use these trees. They're not ruined.
Here's the story. Hard to imagine a lumber shortage here, but it's what we're facing. We're going to talk about it tonight. We're going to talk about a lot tonight. I want to hear what your thoughts are on it. I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to the story. All the ways to communicate with us at the bottom of your screen. I know it's a Friday. Maybe you're out and about right now. Maybe you're watching on your phone with all the other cool kids at the restaurant or the club or the bar, whatever cool kids are doing nowadays. Comment while you're out there, all right? Use the hashtag HeyDan. Email us at thestory@kgw.com. And in the meantime, let's talk big story. Now look, for the first time in state history, the Oregon legislature has expelled a lawmaker. By a 59-1 vote, Mike Nearman is gone. I'll give you a guess who cast that one vote. It was Nearman. He tried. I'm sure you know at this point how this all started with this video. I'll show it to you again. He opened that locked door. He let angry protesters into the Capitol. They then got wrestled out by state troopers, and later some of them outside kicked in one of the front doors of the Capitol and assaulted a police officer with bear mace. It was a mess. As if that video wasn't bad enough, OPB then uncovered video that insinuates Nearman actually helped plan this armed incursion at the state Capitol. This clip that OPB found shows him publicly and flippantly laying out the entire plan, referring to it as Operation Hall Pass, and obviously forgetting about Operation Everything You Do Now is recorded.
We're talking about setting up Operation Hall Pass, which I don't know anything about, and if you accuse me of knowing something about it, I'll deny it, but there would be some person's cell phone, which might be not. That was just random numbers that I spewed out. That's not anybody's actual cell phone. And if you say, "I'm at the west entrance during the session," and text to that number there, that somebody might exit that door while you're standing there. But I don't know anything about that. I don't have anything to do with that. And if I did, I wouldn't say that I did.
Now, I find Nearman's use of sarcasm there to be particularly interesting. In fact, every time he seems to discuss this issue, he takes that joking tone, like when he told talk radio host Lars Larson this.
Someday you're going to be watching Jeopardy and somebody's going to say, "Who is Mike Nearman?" And that's going to be the right answer for that.
Okay. You know what? Why wait? This is Oregon Jeopardy! Let's take a look at the categories. Keeping Portland Weird, Old Timey Dan, Tootie Smith, Oregon State Reps, QAnon, and The Vaults. How about Oregon Reps for 600, please? Here's the clue. This now former Oregon State Rep doesn't seem to understand how serious of a situation he's in, considering he's also facing 2 criminal charges, with one carrying the potential for a year in jail and up to $6,250 in fines. So, with that, let's bring in kind of our legal expert. This is Laura Appelman, a professor at Willamette University, and she helps us navigate these kind of waters, difficult waters sometimes when it comes to how the law will interpret something. And I'm curious, do you think that Nearman is in real trouble with the law here? Will he face real repercussions possibly?
Well, so let's take the actual charges against him, right? So, yes, it's possible he could get, assuming he says he's going to go to trial, so he's not going to make a plea deal, and it's going to be it's by the Marion County DA, which means it'll be a Marion County jury, And as we now know, all it takes is one person. So just one person who doesn't agree he's guilty of these charges could acquit him. But let's say he is convicted or he decides to have a plea deal. Well, from what I can tell, he is a first-time offender. He has no criminal record. So in my view, and of course, you never know what a judge is going to do, but following the general guidelines of the Oregon sentencing guidelines, to me, it's unlikely that he would get the maximum sentence for both misdemeanors.
Now, he has said since the very beginning that he thinks it's wrong that the Capitol was closed off to the public. And that was why,
That's right.
one of the reasons why those protesters were outside that day.
That's right.
He has referred to what happened as simply letting the public into a public building. But do you think that that is the way that the law will interpret that, considering the violence that we saw there?
So he does have a sort of a strong and vocal support. Now, as to whether he actually committed these crimes, that's actually a really interesting question. Because, I mean, I think the criminal trespass one, the Class C misdemeanor, the more minor one, that I think is fairly easy to prove because he did knowingly aid and abet people to trespass on the state capitol. I mean, we have a video of that, and we have, of course, that second video, which purportedly shows that, you know, how these people could contact him. The Class A misdemeanor, though, that I think is a little vaguer.
I'm getting a sense from you that you think if he goes to trial, he has a pretty good chance at an acquittal.
I don't know if it's a pretty good chance. I think there's a possibility of an acquittal. I think if it was a Multnomah County jury, it would be less of a possibility of an acquittal.
So that's a pretty good point. You know, at this point, the whole state has an opinion on this, but Marion County's will be the one that matters if it goes to trial. So why don't we pay them a visit, see what's next for his seat and his district? Kyle Boshi went west of Salem to find out.
In the quiet town of Dallas, Oregon, there's barely a hint of the political drama that's unfolded over the past week after State Representative Mike Nearman, who represents this district, became the first person ever expelled from the Oregon State Legislature.
I believe the right thing was done, and I applaud the legislature for doing so.
Residents in this town, west of Salem, are somewhat split over Nearman's dismissal.
It's a good idea. That's maybe a little late. It's a good idea.
I think that the liberals got a little carried away and they just wanted to get rid of another Republican. Although all the Republicans also voted to get him out. So, I don't know.
I did vote for him. So far, I like him. I think he's good.
Nearman, a Republican who's served in the House since 2015, faced calls to resign after allowing far-right demonstrators, some of them armed, into the locked state capitol building as lawmakers met in a special session last December. Efforts to remove Nearman ramped up again last week when video emerged of Nearman plotting the breach with supporters days beforehand.
And if you say, I'm at the west entrance during the session and text to that number there, that somebody might exit that door while you're standing there.
It's egregious to let armed rioters into the Capitol, state capitol or the nation's capital. And, you know, he shouldn't have done it. It was stupid.
In the end, the Oregon House voted 59-1 on Thursday to expel Nearman, who is still facing 2 criminal charges stemming from his decision to help demonstrators into the Capitol.
And so it seems like they had a majority that wanted him gone. So we'll see what they do with his replacement.
Nearman's seat is now considered vacant, so county commissioners in Benton, Marion, Yamhill, and Polk counties will be responsible for selecting a Republican to fill his spot and serve the remainder of Nearman's term, which runs through next year. Kyle Boshi, KGW News.
Let's turn now and finish our week of wildfire coverage that we've been doing since Monday and finish it here today by reminding you that people are still rebuilding there in these hard-hit communities almost a year later. In fact, some people haven't even been able to start rebuilding yet. Some people simply can't afford to start rebuilding. You see, building materials are crazy expensive right now, especially lumber. High demand and low supply is translating into a longer wait for people to rebuild their lives. Morgan Romero explains.
Look around the wildfire-ravaged Santiam Canyon, and you'll find signs of progress.
There's a lot of construction going on. Our trees have been cut down now.
But some of that has come to a screeching halt.
Trailers to live in while people are rebuilding, or maybe rebuilding in a year or two.
9 months after flames leveled the Testles' home on the mountainside.
So our yard is in shambles.
The family of 6 still lives in a fifth wheel on their property.
Right now we're trying to go for bids for all the parts of building a house. We're having trouble with getting bids.
The price of building materials is skyrocketing, making it tough for many to rebuild after last year's fires.
We have about 50% of our insurance covering our rebuild, so we'll have to go for construction loans. We have to be diligent about getting good bids.
It's every component. It's the concrete for the foundation. It's the gypsum that goes into the drywall. It's the appliances. It's not the cost of metals going up too, and so that in labor and that sort of stuff, they're talking about 25-30% increases in the overall cost of construction if you're building today. And so
right now, lumber costs 3 times what it did before the pandemic. Michelle sees the irony of her rebuild. After all, Oregon is rooted in the timber industry.
Don't understand why, and all the tree supplies here, and you can use these trees. They're not ruined.
Josh Lehner, an economist with the state, says it's not that simple.
Incomes are up, demand for housing is through the roof. And so when you had this shutdown on the supply side of the construction industry, even just for a couple of months, where the demand just continued to surge, it put us behind the 8 ball.
Meaning shortages.
There's the combination of the affordability front of it with the higher prices, and then just the flat out availability of it.
Supply chains are still broken. There aren't enough workers to produce, transport, or build. On the lumber front, mill production just revved back up. But Lehner doesn't expect it to drop to pre-COVID levels.
We know some of this is temporary constraints. We'll get the logistics figured out. We'll get the production numbers back up. And then, of course, with the higher prices, we're gonna see demand cool a little bit, right? We're pretty optimistic that we're going to get our communities rebuilt, but it's obviously taking longer than we had hoped it would.
The Tesdals' thoughts exactly.
It's worth the wait.
While some survivors are waiting till costs come down to rebuild, others move forward.
We're just going to keep on going and try and get the foundation put in at least. Stress gets high, and then we all talk, and it's all happening to us at the same rate. So you back up and say, what's the worst that's happened to us? Well, we didn't die in the fire, and we're out here living on the mountain, and that's good.
Morgan Romero, KGW News.
As you see, they still need help, so we are trying to offer our best kind of way to help you help them. And we're partnering with the Santiam Hospital this week for our Hey Help campaign. They run this group called Santiam Services Integration, and they essentially just help the wildfire victims there in the Santiam Canyon, which you remember, again, one of the hardest hit areas in the entire state last year. Entire towns were burned down. If you want to help, point the phone, your camera on your phone at the QR code you see on the screen right now, and it'll give you a link where you can donate. Or you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp. It's a micro donation drive. Just a little bit of money is all it takes. If you have a little bit, if you want to give a little bit, $5, and it can help people out, $1. I mean, it helps go to the wildfire victims and the housing they need, the health care, food assistance, basic needs, essentially, as well as navigating some of the insurance problems they've been dealing with, as well as the FEMA applications. In the meantime, why don't we count some vaccines right now? We like to do that every day. As of this afternoon, more than 2.37 million Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose. A lot of them have also gotten that second dose. And we're at about 67.4% of the state's population of adults 18 and up with at least one shot. We're hoping to get to that 70% mark. Washington updates their vaccine numbers 3 times a week. So as of yesterday, more than 3.94 million have gotten at least their first dose. That works out to be 64.2% of that state's population 16 and up, because why should we all use the same metrics to count these numbers? Who cares, right? They don't even need to get to 70%. They're going to open up soon no matter what. Now, hey, look, I got this question from a viewer named Carol. How many teenagers have been vaccinated who are not being included in the nightly numbers? And I assume you're talking about Oregon, since, again, Washington does count teenagers who are 16 and older. But let's take a look at the numbers from both states, shall we? For everyone vaccinated between the ages of 12 and 17, in Oregon, more than 113,000 people under the age of 18 have been vaccinated. In Washington, it's more than 217,000 people under 18. This is all according to the CDC. They have been storing up some separate data between adults and kids who get vaccinated. So there you have it. All right, we've got a date now when Portland State Police, the officers there, are going to give their guns up, be disarmed. And it's just in time for students to show back up in the fall. So we'll let you know what the university's president and police chief say they're going to do instead to keep people safe when we come back. I like to read some emails during the break. I was reading a few just a moment ago, picking out some of the ones I'd like to address at the end of the show. So if you have something to say to me or that you'd like to be heard on the show, let me know. Use that hashtag HeyDan or email us at thestory@kgw.com. Now, we've been talking a lot here on the story about the way tear gas has been used in Portland over the last year and what kind of long-term effects it could be having on some of the people living in this community. The New York Times apparently is looking at that too. And they have an update right now that we think is worth your time. They report that lawmakers in Washington, D.C. are investigating tear gas and the companies that make it. They want these companies and the government agencies to ensure that tear gas is safe to use on humans, on the people who are in these communities. After all, the lawmakers point out, we have already agreed not to use tear gas in war, and that military members did have health problems after exposure. There's evidence of that, but it's frequently used by domestic law enforcement officers in communities like Portland. Last month, we told you about women in Portland who reported problems with their menstrual cycles after being exposed to the gas last year.
Where I was literally doubling over and feeling like I need to lay down or like be in a ball basically because I was having such bad cramps. And I had never experienced like menstrual pain like this before. And I've had cramps before, but nothing like this. And to have the spotting as well was really concerning to me.
Researchers at Kaiser Permanente found that 94% of the people they talked to reported a health impact impact of some sort from that gas. More than 1,200 people needed medical care. For some of them, the health problems were so bad, they moved miles away. Starting this fall, officers at Portland State will no longer carry guns at all. It's something that some students and some members of the community have been pushing for years. For a long time, the university, though, dug their heels in, saying that their officers do need to be armed. Now, the conversation around that truly taking their guns away intensified when they killed Jason Washington in 2018 in a high-profile case that set off protests. It wasn't until last summer, though, after the death of George Floyd, that PSU announced that they would, in fact, change the way they police the campus. Last fall, PSU's president said the calls for change that we are hearing at PSU are ringing out across our nation. We must find a new way to protect the safety of our community, one that eliminates systemic racism and promotes the dignity of all who come to our urban campus. He now says new policies are in place to have a fully unarmed campus patrol, and there are several new committees in place, too, to take a look at some different elements to campus safety, including how to respond to people in crisis and creating a welcoming campus. PSU's police chief, Willie Halliburton, welcomes this decision to disarm his officers. He told us so back in February.
We're bringing new police officers, new mentalities. We're getting people in this occupation who want to be of service.
Now, tonight on Straight Talk, Laurel Porter is talking with Nicholas Kristoff. He is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and he grew up in Yamhill County. Laurel met with him on his family farm in Yamhill.
What did you grow here when you were a kid? What did you do here on the farm?
So I was very active in 4-H and FFA, and I had sheep, which periodically fed the local coyotes. And then we also had cherry trees. This was all pie cherries back then. And people weren't eating enough cherry pies. And, no. And
what happened to the cherries?
So in 2018, the people who had been buying our cherries told us that they couldn't buy them anymore. And so we had to figure out what to do with our orchard. And my wife is allergic to filberts.
Oh, so no hazelnuts, okay.
And, you know, this was right when we were working on our last book, and we saw the need for employment opportunities around here. Cherries and hazelnuts don't provide a lot of value added or processing. Cider apples do, and, you know, maybe provide some branding. And so we decided to take a gamble and put in the cider apples, and then on the other side of the road behind us, we put in grapes, wine grapes.
Did Laurel edit that? The video was constantly on her the whole time. No, I think what happens is sometimes we do a 2-camera shoot, and whoever edited that piece forgot to use the other angle of Nicholas Kristoff talking. So anyhow, it is nice looking at Laurel the whole time, no problems there. But he talked a lot to Laurel. It was a really interesting piece as they kind of strutted there through the property and talked a lot about his life and about growing up in Yamhill. And one of the things, if you know much about Nicholas Kristoff, is the way he has looked at the people who grew up around him, including the way that some of his classmates' lives have turned out.
When we were on the bus, we were all so optimistic. Things had been going really, really well. And then jobs went away. People, especially men, self-medicated with meth, which was coming through, then with other drugs. They got criminal records, which made them less employable, less marriageable. We were all really proud here of our rural values, of our social fabric. And Laurel, that just unraveled so quickly. So at this point, about 1/3 of the kids on my bus are dead of drugs, alcohol, or suicide. And, you know, the kids who got on the bus right after me each morning were the 5 NAP kids. Farland, who was my year, and then his brother Zealand, sister Regina, brother Nathan, brother Keelan. Farland lost his job, self-medicated with drugs, died of liver failure as a result. Zealand died in a house fire when he was passed out drunk. Nathan blew himself up cooking meth. Regina died of hepatitis from IV drug use. And baby Keelan died just at the beginning of the pandemic. After he lost his job, he died of an overdose in his mom's home. And so 5 kids who at one point seemed to epitomize all the hope in this area, all gone. And their mom is still alive and walks up to visit their graves every day. It just breaks my heart.
I mean, so powerful, really a powerful conversation. And he tells Laurel how people are struggling as working class jobs have disappeared across the country and in our home here in Oregon. And he has some harsh criticism for Oregon's education system. That's coming up tonight at 7 o'clock. Okay, in the meantime, keep sending in your questions and comments. Use that hashtag #HeyDan. I'm going to read a few of them as we finish the story and the week right after this. Okay, Patrick Burke commenting and saying, more Laurel. Thank you, Mr. Editor, talking about how we kind of, with the editing there, accidentally used the wrong camera when Nicholas Kristoff was answering your question and the camera just kind of stayed on Laurel for 2 minutes. But who's complaining? Nobody's complaining about that, right? So Kevin Loomis writing in and saying, hey, Dan, pretty much upset about us continuing to cover the Representative Nearman case and him being expelled from the legislature. And I got another email from Joe Shore saying, Nearman, enough, let's move on. So here's the deal. For one, it's a historic thing that happened, so we kind of wanted to talk about that. 2, we had tennis on all day today, so there was no 4 o'clock news, no 5 o'clock news. So at 6 o'clock, we kind of had to give you a little meat and potatoes about what happened today, considering the historic nature of it. And number 3, we played Jeopardy on the show. I mean, you're not going to find that everywhere. I know you're not, right? A couple other things. This one coming in on Twitter saying, hey, Dan, Nearman's attorney should be livid about the radio interview. You know, he's actually spoken up a lot about what happened, and never once has he showed any type of remorse for it. And I'm not sure, and if you talk to a couple of experts who are analyzing, I guess, Laura Appelman today, as I was talking to her, analyzing the way he's going about this, it's unclear that he is looking to avoid any type of punishment. You know, especially if he goes to trial. It seems as though he might be aiming to make a point. But we're just going to have to wait to see how it all plays out as this week has played out. It is Friday. I'm going to let you go. I'll see you back here on Monday. How about that? That's the story.